Hey guys, in this tutorial I will be doing a step-by-step on how to make these fingerless gloves. In today's tutorial, you will need one skein of yarn, scissors, a stitch marker, or you can literally use a piece of yarn, just cut it off and use it as a stitch marker, or literally anything you want. And of course, crochet stick, preferably a smaller one. I'm using a 5mm. You can use a 5mm or probably maybe even smaller, maybe a 4.5 or a 4. I don't own a 4.5 or a 4, so a 5 actually works pretty nice for me. This is how using a 5mm hook turned out for this glove, so do with that as you will. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So for step 1, first you're going to want to make a slip knot. I just want to say before we start, I would say this is like a beginner intermediate project. So if you're a beginner, I wouldn't recommend this unless you're like, you catch on really fast. If you're like an intermediate beginner or of course experienced, then this will be fine for you. Once you've made your slip knot, you are going to chain 13. Also, I'd like to clarify why we are chaining 12. So the length of your chain will be the length of the cuff on the wrist. So this area of the glove here, as much as you chain, will be as long as your cuff is in this area. So if you want a really long cuff, you can make a longer chain. You'll just have to adapt to the pattern a different way. If you want a pretty average, decent sized cuff, I'd say 12 is pretty okay. If you want a really short one, then you would probably crochet 6. So once you have 13 chains, you're going to want to single crochet into the second stitch. So not this first one, this first stitch right here, this one, don't go into that one. That's the very first stitch. You're going to want to go into the second one right here. And just take your yarn over and pull through. Once you've done that, put a single crochet into the remaining 12 stitches. And then that'll be row 1. Once you have row 1 done, you're going to want to chain 1 and turn your work. So you should be facing the back, not the front. For row 2, put your stick into chain 1 into the back loop of chain 1. So this back loop right here, you're gonna want to single crochet through the back loop only, not the front loop or both, just the back loop. And single crochet into that one back loop. Once you've done that, just single crochet into the back loop of each chain for row 2. Alright, now that we have 2 rows, you're going to repeat everything we just did for row 1 and 2 for 22 more rows. So in total, you should have 24 rows by the end of this. If you do end up needing more rows based off of the length of your wrist, just make sure that it's an even number. So 26 rows, 28 rows, 30 rows, 32, etc. But for an average, 24 rows is perfectly okay. So of course, for row 3, chain 1 and turn your work. And keep going for 22 rows. Alright, once you have 24 rows, put it around your wrist. Make sure that is enough rows for your wrist size. If not, like I said earlier, just make sure you have an even number amount of rows until it's a good size for you. But for average, 24 is fine. If it's a little bit tight on your wrist, that's okay, as crochet stretches over time. You don't want it to be super loose. So, you know, once you get adjusted to it, it's fine. But once you have all 24 rows finished, you're going to slip stitch both ends together. Chain 1. After you chain 1, take your crochet hook, stick it through the first stitch, stick it through the other first stitch, pull through, and slip stitch. And then just keep doing that for every stitch until you get to the end, and you'll have both together. Once you have both ends slip stitched together, you're gonna want to take your hook out from the loop and then grab the bottom of your cuff and flip it inside out like so. So then your loop should end up on the inside of your cuff instead of the outside and at the top. Once you do that, you can insert your hook back into the loop and tighten it. Now we will be working on the lower body of the glove, so about this part of your hand and below. Actually, exclude what I said before. Turn your work around so your loop is still on the inside, but you're gonna be working on this outside edge to stitch around the ribbing. Also, if you want, while you're stitching around the ribbing, you can stitch in your tail just to get that out the way so you don't have to weave it in later. But basically, you're going to be doing single crochets around the whole ribbing, which should be 24 single crochets. Once you're done with that, we will meet up for the next part. Also, these like center rows, it might seem a little hard to put your hook in depending on how tight your tension is. So just kind of like dig around until you can get in and slip stitch. Once you have finished row 1 of single crocheting your first row and you get back to your first stitch or the last stitch, single crochet the last stitch together, and then take your stitch marker or your piece of yarn, whatever you're using, and mark your last stitch. Alright, now that you have a stitch marker in round 1, for row 2, we are gonna single crochet around the whole cuff again until you get back to your stitch marker. Single crochet into your first stitch, and then just keep going around the whole round. Alright, once you make it back to your stitch marker, you're going to single crochet in the last stitch. And now for round 3, we are going to increase the glove. So to do that, we're going to single crochet the first 4 stitches after the last stitch you just did, and then put 2 single crochets in the stitch after. So the 5th stitch after the 4 stitches you put single crochet in, you're going to put 2 single crochets. So 1, 2, 3, 4. On the 5th stitch, you're going to do 2 single crochets. So 1, 2 single crochets inside the same stitch, and then you're going to repeat that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 2 single crochets in the 5th stitch. And for round 3, you're just going to keep doing that until you get back to your stitch marker. Once you approach your last 4 stitches, you're just going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then your last stitch before you get back to your stitch marker, you're going to do your last single crochet increase. So 2 single crochets in the last stitch. So now you can take your stitch marker and move it up if you haven't moved it already. And now we're just gonna do single crochets around every row for the next 6 rows. So in total, that should be 9 rounds. So now that we've increased, just do normal single crochets for each round until you get to the 9th round. Alright, once you have continued your 6 rows of single crochet, in total 9 rows, it should look like this. And once you reach your last stitch, once you've done your last single crochet in the round, you're going to want to chain 7. Once you have chained 7, you're going to want to count 7 stitches and then chain on the 8th stitch. Count 7 stitches and single crochet on the 8th stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you want, you can take your hook off of your yarn and try on your glove. As you can see, we are now starting to form the thumb area and work our way up to here. If it's uncomfortable for you, remember crochet stretches, but if you need to, or if you would like, you could add more rows to this area so that this area becomes more comfortable for you. But like I said, crochet stretches, so it could work. Once you have single crocheted your chain into the 8th stitch, just single crochet all the way around until you get back to the beginning of your thumb hole. Alright, once you single crochet all the way around, once you get to the last stitch before the thumb hole starts, we're just gonna increase with 2 single crochets. So this very last stitch before these stitches, just do 1, 2 single crochets in the same stitch. Once you do that, single crochet across your chain, and then when you get to the last stitch after your last stitch in your chain, we're also going to do another increase of 2 single crochets in the same stitch. Before you single crochet on your chain, you can take your stitch marker and mark your increase, and then single crochet. All right, once you have single crocheted across your chain stitch at the beginning of your thumb hole, the stitch right after your last chain stitch, we're going to increase. So 1, 2. Now for the rest of the glove, we are going to single crochet around the glove for 5 more rows. Once you get to your last stitch and your last row, just do a slip stitch, take your hook out, and cut the string. Now once you've done that, we're going to work on the thumb hole. Now we're going to make another slip knot. The next step is to insert your crochet hook inside the same stitch that you left your stitch marker in. Now you're going to put your slip knot on your hook. You're gonna drag it through, and then you're gonna pull through and make a stitch. Once you've done that, then you're just gonna single crochet around the whole entire thumb hole, and then the next round we will increase. Now that you have single crocheted around for the first round, once you get back to your stitch marker, you're going to slip stitch in the first stitch of the round, and now we will increase. Last round I forgot to mention, you can also weave in your tail, which I forgot to do, so I will just do it for the increase round. For round 2 of the thumb, we're going to increase. So we're going to increase on every 7th stitch. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. On the 7th stitch, you're going to increase. All right. So every other stitch, normal single crochet. When you get to the 7th stitch, increase on the 7th stitch. So 2 single crochets in the 7th stitch. By the time you get done increasing, there should be about 2 to 3 stitches left. You're just gonna single crochet those stitches that are left, and we're done increasing for now. Once you do those 2 last single crochets, you're gonna do 1 round of single crochet around the whole thumb. Once you have reached the end of the 3rd round, we are going to decrease the round every 4 stitches, and the final round will be 1 round of single crochet. So on the 4th stitch, you will decrease your single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4. So on the 4th stitch, we will decrease. Repeat that for the rest of the round. And for the last round, which is row 5, you will just single crochet around the round. Once you reach your last stitch, you should have slip stitch, and once you do that, you can take your hook out and cut the string. Now you have fingerless glove. Now all there's left to do is weave in any loose ends. And just like that, you have a new pair of fingerless gloves. I hope this tutorial was helpful, and if you followed along, please let me know if it makes sense and if it turned out good for you. This is my first tutorial ever, so you know, I hope it worked out, and yeah, I hope you enjoy this tutorial, and